There was an old woman who lived alone on a farm with a neat and tidy vegetable garden, a bunch of cats, and a grove of plum trees that the woman and her late husband had planted many years before. It was late summer, early fall, one of those crisp days when the air is light and glorious, and she awakened that morning wanting nothing so much as an apple cake with her supper. But alas, she had that plum grove, but no apple tree, so she had no apples. And as she fed the cats and cooked and ate her breakfast, she formulated a plan that she was going to gather a bunch of dried plums from the spring before, put them in a basket, and take them to the nearest village to sell at the Wednesday market. And the village was separated from the farm by 3 tall, yellow hills and neighboring properties. So she got her basket over her arm, and she set off up the first hill and down the other side. And as she came over the hill, she saw a young farm wife feeding a flock of geese. "Good morning," they called out to one another. "What do you have there?" the farm wife asked. "I have a basket of dried plums that I am hoping to trade in the village for apples." "Oh, I wish that I had apples to give you," said the farm wife, "for there is nothing that my husband likes better than a good plum tart." "Well, better that one of us should be happy at least," the woman said. "And if you will give me a basket full of goose down, I will give you the plums in return." The farm wife didn't hesitate. She went and got a big, tightly packed bundle of goose down, and she traded it for that napkin wrapped around all those plums. The woman waved, and she set off on her way over the second yellow hill. She went up one side and down the other. Now, she always liked coming over the second hill because she could look down on a house which had a beautiful flower garden around it, and today was no exception. There were late summer red roses blooming, and there were yellow and orange lilies, and there were purple coneflowers, and there were beds of white impatiens. And oh, it was a delight to the nostrils to smell those flowers. But it was an assault to the ears to hear what was going on. As she got closer, she heard wadding, straw, no, wadding, no, straw. And she realized it was the raised voices of the young husband and wife, and they were fighting over what was the best material with which to stuff a cushion. When the husband saw her, he said, "Here, here. Our neighbor will help us settle this argument. What do you think the best material is? I say wadding. My wife says straw to stuff a cushion." She looked at her basket. "I don't think either one," she said. "I think goose down is what you need." "My grandmother had a goose down cushion," said the wife, and she immediately gave up the idea of the straw. They offered to buy her feathers. She said, "Surely, in the middle of all this beauty, you have an apple tree." But they did not. But they convinced her to take instead a huge bundle of freshly cut flowers, and they hurried around gathering them for her. And so once again, she waved goodbye. She made her way on with her basket full of these wonderfully scented fresh-cut flowers, and she went up the third hill and down the other side. Now, as she crested that third hill, she saw a young man coming toward her, and he should have been a nice-looking young man, but he was frowning so hard, his countenance was so dark, and she called out to him, "Good morning, sir, and a fine, fair morning it is." "Fair or foul," he said when he got closer, "it's all the same to me. The jeweler has failed to make good on his promise of making a ring for my sweetheart, and now I must go to her empty-handed." "Oh, no, you shall not," the woman said. "You will take her this wonderful big bouquet of flowers." Well, at that, the young man's face brightened, and she could indeed see how handsome he was. "I must give you something in return," he said, and from around his own neck, he took a solid gold chain, and he dropped it into her now empty basket. Well, now the woman was fairly skipping. She could get a whole stall of apples for the weight and the price of this gold chain in the village. And so she went along and she went into a dimly lit cobbled side street that she knew would lead her to the village marketplace. And as she walked down that street, she saw a very sad sight indeed. There was a mother, and a little boy and a little girl, one on each side of her, and a little white dog. And the white dog was the only one who looked happy. Its tail was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the children, they sat with their faces in their hands. And the mother, she had her head down, and she was crying. Why, whatever is the matter? The old woman said when she got closer. We have no money, the young mother said. We cannot buy any food, and tomorrow we will be turned out of our home, for we cannot pay the rent. Well, even if she did not get her apple cake, the old woman had a heart. She did the only thing she could. She lifted the gold chain out of the basket. She told the young mother to hold out her hand, and she dropped the gold into it and closed the young mother's hand around it. Oh, thank you, the woman said. Thank you on behalf of me and my children. And the old woman said, good, now you will not be turned out of your home. You will not be hungry. And a little sad and sorrowfully, she continued on her way to market, where she hoped someone would at least give her a drink of water before she continued back out again and on her way home. And she heard footsteps behind her, and she turned around, and she saw that it was the little boy, and under his left arm he had that little white dog. And he said, my mother thanks you again for all that you did for us, and we have nothing to give you, but we thought perhaps you would like our little dog to keep you company. Now, the woman didn't really want a dog, and she knew her cats didn't really want a dog, but she didn't want to be rude, and so she sighed, and she lowered her basket, and the dog jumped in, and he was heavy, much heavier than anything she'd carried so far, and she continued on her way, and she rounded the last corner, and there was a house on that last street on the way to the market, and she had noticed it before, but she'd never come this particular way on a fall day like this. And she saw that the house had a walled garden, and hanging over the wall were the limbs of a scallop gilliflower apple tree. Scallop gilliflower apples are pinkish red, and they have a little gold blush on them, and they're very tasty. As she got closer, she could see that there was a man sitting on a bench in the sun in the yard between the wall and the house. And she called out to him, oh, good morning to you, sir. What a fine day to be sitting in the sun. Yes, it is. It is a fine day. But I'm old and I am lonely, and I would enjoy this sunshine much more if I had a little dog to keep me company. Little dog like this one, she said. Yes, a little dog exactly like that one. So she opened the gate and she tipped the basket out, and she allowed the little dog to run up to the man. And he licked his hand, and then he jumped and he licked his face. And as the old man sat there holding the dog in his lap, he said, now I must give you something in return. What would you like? I would be happy with a drink of water. And if you would fill this basket with those scallop gilliflower apples, she said. The man did exactly as she requested. And she began to make her way, as she had come, out of town and back over each of the 3 yellow hills, going up one side and down the other. She arrived home late that afternoon in plenty of time to cook an apple cake, make her supper. And she ate that apple cake all by herself. It was warm and brown and bubbly and sweet, and oh, it was delicious.